What motivates you most to be in the field of learning?
Dr. Keating, Chief Learning Officer, Workforce Futurist, and an author of The Trusted Learning Advisor.
Learning saved my life. Literally. I struggled significantly in school because I didn't learn how to learn. And eventually, the struggle became so significant that I dropped out of high school. So I didn't even finish 10th grade. That being said, fast forward, I have my Doctorate of Education from an Ivy League university. I'm a professor at the same Ivy League university. I'm the Chief Learning Development Officer for BDO. I've got a book out about learning. And once I learned how to learn, I recognized that learning is a superpower for all of us. And for me, I became, and still am, in my opinion, unstoppable. It's unlocked my human potential.
Keith, welcome to the show. Thanks so much for joining. I'm really excited that you're here today. I'm thinking of how we met the first time. I saw an article written about you. I think it was California Business Journal when you were launching your new book last October. And I remember reading it and being, there you go. Yeah. And I remember I think it's that one. Yeah, and I remember reading the article and really resonating with how you framed the challenge, the opportunity with L&D. And so I cold LinkedIn messaged you, and lo and behold, we're here today chatting together. So thanks for joining again.
Absolutely, and I think this is your inaugural episode.
That's right. So
I'm very honored to be the first.
I am really glad that you could be the one that helps us open this. So the first question maybe I would ask is something a little bit more personal, perhaps. What motivates you most to be in the field of learning?
So I think to answer that, I have to go back to my origin story. And I would start by saying, learning saved my life. Literally. And I don't mean my formative education years. In fact, those did probably the exact opposite. I struggled significantly in school because I didn't learn how to learn. And I don't think that I was set up for success necessarily in that system. And it is a system. And eventually, the struggle became so significant that I dropped out of high school. So I didn't even finish 10th grade. I'm a high school dropout. That being said, fast forward, I have my Doctorate of Education from an Ivy League university. I'm a professor at the same Ivy League university. I'm the Chief Learning Development Officer for BDO. I've got a book out about learning. So what's the convergence between the divergence? It's that I learned how to learn. And once I learned how to learn, I recognized that learning is a superpower for all of us. And for me, I became, and still am, in my opinion, unstoppable. It's unlocked my human potential. I don't worry about the future of my job because there's always going to be jobs available that I can learn how to do. And approximately 40% of our workforce today are worried about the future of their jobs. And so if I could gift anything to the world, it would be to understand the power that comes along with learning and development, and that it unlocks your human potential.
Wow. And I think I remember reading something like this, and that's why it really resonated. Especially the idea that learning kind of saved your life. I think for me, it was more from the experience of being an immigrant, where learning and education is a really critical part of making it in the new country. So I think there's some parallels there. I'm just curious when you figured out how to learn, any insights you could share a little bit on what is it that you discovered that worked for you?
I think first, the belief that you can. I remember largely growing up feeling like I couldn't. And I think some of that was because there are areas I just don't want to learn. Like, for example, math. I am horrible at math. I can balance a checkbook. I can give you 2 + 2. Anything beyond that, there was just never an interest in it. And it became one of the challenges, of course, in school for me. And so that the failure of that became the focus rather than the celebration of where I was able to excel elsewhere. And so it became pretty clear. And I think this is true today when you look at something like Netflix. So there's these, I see these memes online like, oh, our attention span is getting shorter and shorter. And it's like attention span of a goldfish. I think that's a myth. There's not really data to back it up. What has changed is the distractions and the disruptions. So yes, there's a lot more of that. But if we can sit down and binge watch our favorite Netflix series for 8 hours a day, we can do that because we want to, because that's where our interest level is. And so for me, this sounds very basic, but it was just recognizing that I need to be interested in it. I need to understand the why of what I'm learning and the context and the relevance. You just can't teach me some abstract idea, not set it up for me, not help me understand how I'm going to apply it, where it's useful, if I'm ever going to use it, and expect me to learn it. So at a very simple level, it was understanding there's an interest aspect and then there's context and relevance.
Interesting. And that, something that we also really see a lot, when we are with our running Sparkwise, you want people who are really motivated, and that drives engagement and interaction and application afterwards. What have you learned about? Oh, go ahead.
The motivation piece is critical. The with them, the what's in it for me. And you and I, we've spoken about Sparkwise, and that was one of the things that I really appreciated about the platform was the way that you're thinking about the design from a learning sciences perspective, an engagement perspective, and motivation perspective. And those are just some fundamental aspects that have to be taken into consideration for learning and development to be successful. And I don't think a lot of platforms or design focus on that.
Yeah. One question I have is, if you think about busy professionals who are every day kind of working on their task and role, and you as an L&D leader want to engage them, helping them find the time and the mind share to really engage is difficult. So the bar for motivation almost is higher, right? So I'm curious, how have you helped them understand what's in it for me? In what way has that seemed more impactful in your previous work?
It starts a bit broader than I think the individual person. So I'd say there's different levels or different categories. I'll start with focusing on the overall culture in the organization. I can go in and I can meet with individual people and get to know them and figure out what motivates them and help them understand the why and all of that. But we don't have the amount of resources to go in and do this on a case-by-case basis. So you have to take a step back and look at what is the culture like in the organization. Is there a learning culture? And I think most organizations have some sort of learning culture, even if it's very minute. This is one of those situations where it starts at the top. I have worked at a number of organizations where there's not a learning culture necessarily that's obvious. There's a lot of words by leaders, and then I get brought in and get asked to create a learning culture, but I have no support from the top down. So if leaders, executives are not A, leading by example, and B, to your point, creating space and time for learning, I'm not going to be successful. The priority in most organizations, unless you're a nonprofit, of course, is to make money. But there are value propositions and return on investments and great intrinsic and extrinsic outcomes from learning and development that organizations need to recognize. So in summary, to answer your question, I think the overall learning culture is the important piece that I try to focus on, rather than thinking about learning as a distinct activity or initiative. Like, we often think of learning as something that gets done to you. Like, hey, Vince, we're going to send you to learning today. And you're like, oh God, what did I do? Why? How long is this going to be? Okay, it's 8 to 5. Fine. I'll do this for today. We know based on years and years of data, research, science, that that's not the proper way to learn. And you cannot learn concretely in just that single moment. We have to stop thinking of learning as this start and stop activity versus something that's embedded into everything that we do. So within that learning culture framework, the other piece is helping people see learning isn't just something that you go to for that moment. There are learning moments in your life every single day. You know, there's on-the-job learning, there's coaching, there's mentorship, there's these programs, but then there needs to be sustainment to these programs so that it's not just 8 to 5, but it's 8 to 5 and we've planted the seeds, but here's what we're doing over the next 6 months to bring it back and make it experiential, make it contextualized, talk about the learning transfer, how you're applying it in your job, making it real to you. So long story short, learning culture, I think, is the most important approach that we can take to helping individuals and organizations recognize the value and importance of learning.
Very cool and really interesting, because when I asked the question, I thought you might talk more about personalized learning. So let's dive into the culture a bit, it's really fascinating. You mentioned one of the things that allows learning culture to be built is how the leaders show up and how they create the conditions, almost by role modeling, it sounds like. But are there other levers you've seen that organizational leaders pull, either top down or allow the condition of culture to really arise? Or is it actually more a function of the kinds of people you recruited into the company and that forms a culture? I'm curious what you've seen.
I think it's both. So I'll talk a little bit about what we're doing today at BDO, and we're coming at it from both angles. So to your second point, absolutely, it is about the people that you're bringing into the organization. I just finished a 2-day workshop or 2-day conference, if you will, for upcoming college graduates. And in speaking with them, one of the questions I asked them was, what's your relationship like with learning? You know, you've been in school for a massive part of your life at this point. Of these 4 options, are you just done with it because you're burnt out? Do you feel like, yeah, if I must do it, I will? Do you feel like I want to learn? Or do you recognize there's power in being a lifelong learning? I didn't give them any context about why I was asking them. And I gave them this survey and they answered the survey live. And then I said, great. Now, any of you that answered number 3 or number 4, you'll be a great fit for BDO. For the first 2, this isn't the right place for you, because learning doesn't stop once you finish school. So it's a message that I'm sharing with our upcoming college graduates, our new recruits, our recruitment, our talent acquisition, is that we have to be finding people that recognize that the most important skill for the future of work is learning. Now, World Economic Forum says, technology fluency, absolutely, AI, critical thinking, growth mindset, problem solving, all those things are important, but those can all be encompassed within learning. So part 1 of your question is, yes, who you're recruiting is absolutely paramount, and looking for those skill set and who has a growth mindset and who recognizes the power and value of learning. The second piece is, it is an internal learning culture that needs to already exist. And it can be top down in many ways. So one other example at BDO, and I'm not trying to sell, I'm just trying to share.
No, these examples are very helpful, right? Because they bring it to life, what you're doing on the ground to cultivate it.
So AI, one of the most important things that every organization is talking about today, how can I use it? What's the value of it, et cetera, et cetera. At BDO, we took our executive level team, so our CEO and his 8 direct reports, and we put them in a 3-day boot camp, hands-on boot camp, where they literally learned how to code in Microsoft Azure. They built their own knowledge bases. They built their own GPTs. The approach that we're taking is, we don't want them, the leaders of the company, just to be using lip service and saying things like, yeah, we have to think about AI, but then not actually understand it. And that to me was a huge win and an evolution of how we're thinking about learning at BDO, because they took 3 days. That's a lot of time to be in a hands-on AI boot camp.
Yeah, it's a real
So
executive commitment.
yeah, absolutely. So that's one example. Another example is holding leaders accountable. So it's one thing to say, yes, learning is important and we want to make time for it, but what's the accountability to back that up? So we have SPOs, strategic priority objectives, and every leader it has to track these, and their compensation plan is associated with them. What we're looking at now is how do we add an SPO to make people leaders accountable for all the people under them, to make sure that they're giving them time and space to learn, but that they're also having this ongoing dialogue about what they're learning and how it applies to their job. I find in many organizations it's like a tick the box exercise. Like, yep, Vince went through 10 hours of training last year, great. But the leader is not engaged. They don't necessarily know why, how, the relevance, any of that. So we want the leaders to be coming along on the journeys with their direct reports. And the third example I'll give you, this year we are running a conference called the Skill Up Summit. And the Skill Up Summit is a 3 half-day event that focuses on 3 core themes: leadership, strategy, and AI. And these are core skills that we want to be developing in everybody across the firm. This year, we made it mandatory. So the fact that the CEO and the executive team is willing to use that language, because that's really strong language that says, hey, you have to take 3 half days. That's 12 hours in a 1-week period that everyone needs to participate in this. And so we've invested a lot of time, money, resources in this. And so those are 3 concrete examples of what leaders can do to personify a learning culture.
Keith, you've been busy since you joined in January. I mean, you had barely 4 or 5 months. This may be a good segue to talk about some of the principles that you mentioned in the book, The Trusted Learning Advisor, and how it's actually playing out on the ground, and maybe now or in the past, right? In this case, it seems like you have incredible executive buy-in and trust that is allowing you to partner with business leaders and really make learning a core part of the organizational agenda. And it's trickling down not just at the leadership level, but across the organization. And it seems like it also is playing out in the way that performance reviews might be being done and so on, which seems like really a good way to institutionalize the concept of learning in different ways. How has the principles of what you wrote about in the book been something you are intentionally applying in this new organization?
Let me preface that it's not easy. So your timing is everything. And what I love is I wrote the book when I was in a more complacent environment. I'm not going to mention names. And so I had done everything I could in that organization, and they didn't want to grow anymore. And so I knew there wasn't a need for me. So while I was planning my transition, I reflected on my 20 plus years of experience and ended up writing the book. The timing is great because I've been rereading it as I joined BDO, because I thought this is a perfect opportunity for me to really try it out. Because I wrote it, when I wrote it, I wasn't doing it. I had already done it. But now that I'm starting over, I went back and reread it, and I highlighted a lot. It's an interesting experience to go back and reread your own book and make sure, okay, this is what I said. Now let me go and do this and double check to make sure that it really works. What I can say is the principles are working, but it's, as an L&D practitioner, talent development practitioner, it's extremely frustrating because the book is not a holy grail. And I don't believe that we ever truly become trusted learning advisors, meaning we're not done. It's this journey that we're going to constantly
Never
be
ending.
evolving.
Yeah.
It is never ending, because every time you meet somebody new, you have to start over. You go right back to zero, and it's like, okay, I've got to go through all these steps and build up this trust and build the relationship and demonstrate credibility and get quick wins and take the order. And it is exhausting. And it's a constant reminder in the back of my head about the why. Why are we doing this? What's the value of it? It will get better. It takes time. So to answer your question, I'm rereading the book. I'm applying the principles. I I have the initial buy-in from this level in the organization because they're the ones that brought me in. But now I have about 7 or 8 levels down here where they're not yet bought in. And so that's really where the heavy lifting for me comes in, is building those relationships and demonstrating that credibility and trying to get some quick wins with them, because I am transparently being treated like an order taker. Everyone has come at me with all of their priorities, their strategies, and asking about mine. And I'm trying to politely say, I just got here. I'm not even sure what this acronym means. I'm not even sure what this business unit does. It takes time. And I don't want to announce a strategy based on what I did someplace else. I can take the strategy from GM or HSBC, but it has to be contextualized to this organization. So to answer your question, it's been an interesting experience to reread the book, apply the principles. I would say I have some wins, some good wins that I'm proud of, but I think largely we still have maybe another year or so ahead of us for really building that credibility of why we should be trusted.
Interesting. When you mentioned, that timing has been great, and you mentioned timing in terms of you transitioning to a new role, having just written the book, and having the chance to apply it. It also seems like timing is playing out right now in the sense that with AI, there's more opportunities for change and disruption in organizations, which seems to be creating pull for learning because people need to shift. And that is also creating a moment for you to build champions inside the business. Is that fair to say?
Just to clarify, when you say champions, are you referring champions around AI or champions around learning in general?
I guess it's champions around people who feel AI is something to respond to, and therefore seeing learning as a critical partner on the organizational journey to taking on this challenge.
I don't know that, I'm going to speak generally. I don't know that we're there yet. Organizations, and this is based on what I'm hearing, seeing, reading, and talking about with other companies and BDO as well, it's largely thought of as an IT or an innovation. It depends on how your businesses are set up. But I think there's also a little bit of like, this is my toy. Like we're IT, we're tech, we're innovation. Like, this is ours. We'll tell you what training needs to happen, but you guys stay over there. And to me, AI is for all of us. No one owns it. I get, there will be different parts of the business that will own maybe your policies and procedures and the legal aspects behind it. But it would be like saying, in the late 1990s, well, IT owns the internet. Like, no one else should be talking about the internet or going on it. It's just IT. No. We all have a part to play in the success of AI. And I think there's multiple aspects of it. What I appreciate about what we did at BDO was, after the 3-day boot camp, we then now challenge those same leaders, rethink your strategy with AI being first. How's that going to change the way that you think about your business? And so that's what we're doing right now. We're doing a lot of design thinking initiative to rethink your business. That's not largely thought of as an L&D activity. So it also depends on how learning is thought about in the organizations itself. For me, my message to L&D practitioners is, if you can't get a seat at the table, then build your own table and invite others to come and sit with you. And so an example of that is, we should be proactively thinking about our business partners and how AI could impact them. And you know what? If they're thinking about it too, that's okay. That's great. We want everybody thinking about this. But what I'm seeing is L&D is mostly sitting back, kind of like, okay, I'll wait, and then someone's going to tell me what to do. And being complacent like that is putting us at risk. And the word that I like to think about is irrelevance. Our business partners pretty soon are going to realize they can use AI to create a lot of the stuff that we do. So we've got to be first to market. We've got to be first to them and tell them how they can change their business and how we're already using AI to help increase our efficiency, reduce our cost, drive greater value, bring those ideas to them. So I guess in summary, I would say, I don't think that L&D is being looked at yet as it could be, but I also think that it's partially L&D's fault. We tend to wait for permission. And that's kind of what I mean about build your own table and invite people to sit with you. Don't wait for permission. You're not going to get your hand slapped to proactively thinking about how assurance or advisory or legal or IT could be using AI, or you're not going to get your hand slapped for looking at the World Economic Forum or McKinsey Global Institute and bringing that data to conversations to say, hey, this is what's happening in the marketplace. Hey, here's what our competitors are doing. Hey, here's 3 ways that you could think about doing your business differently. Hey, here's 3 ways that we're already using AI, and here's the value from it. So I think that's what L&D needs to be doing, is being that proactive, trusted advisor.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And, as you said, it sounds like, and my impression generally is also that the mandate of the classic L&D function is going to evolve pretty fast, in the sense that today or historically, there was a lot of L&D that was around content creation and sort of making it available. But that function is very easily automated through AI. And it seems like what you're saying is there's an opportunity for L&D to redefine its mandate, but no one knows the answer right now, and it's probably also different by the context of the organization. And so if you don't trailblaze that yourself, then your mandate is stuck in the past, and that is going to probably go away, pretty soon.
So the answer is yes. The idea of that traditional L&D model, I think, has changed. Like, there's enough content out there. And I think one of the things that we have to be careful of too is making sure that we're being purposeful about AI. And I feel like, at least what I'm seeing on LinkedIn and some other news sites, it's starting to calm down maybe a little bit, or maybe I'm just not paying attention to it as much as I was. But it's not going to solve every single problem. It's not going to replace us 100%. There are things that it can do better than us, but it's being purposeful about, why are we using this? It's the same, VR, AR, MR, 10, 12 years ago, L&D was going to be revolutionized with virtual reality. Everything was going to be VR. Everybody would have Oculus and all this stuff. And so you look back then, if you paid attention, it would be the exact same thing. It needs to be purposeful and intentional. Not everything should be VR. Yes, there are great use cases for it, especially when you need to create an environment that otherwise you wouldn't normally have access to. But not everything needs that. And so it's the same kind of with AI at this point. Not everything needs to be, content generated. Like at this point, even with the photos and images, you can tell immediately which ones came from ChatGPT. And it's just, it gets to this exhaustion level. So I think we're going to kind of come back to the center. That being said, AI for L&D is going to be extremely valuable. Well, the ultimate value proposition from a learning perspective for AI is it's going to democratize our ability to learn. It puts a coach, it puts a mentor in your pocket. I use it every single day. And ChatGPT is kind of my go-to, and everything I do goes through ChatGPT first. even if just to brainstorm, just to get some feedback. Like I'll be like, hey, how does this sound? What do you think about this? What ways could I tighten this? How could this be better? I fed everything into it that I've ever written, any ideas I've had, what I like, what I don't like. And so it knows me. And there's some sense of this personalization. Now, I think we're getting ahead of ourselves with, oh my God, everything's going to be personalized. Yeah, maybe in a while. It's not coming right now. And so again, it goes back to what are the specific use cases and the value propositions for it. So I think the coaching piece, but on the flip side, 42% of the world still doesn't even have the internet.
Yeah.
So we have to be careful about how we're saying, oh, this is the best thing. It's going to change the entire world. There are still other issues at play before everybody has access to AI.
There's generally also cost implications of AI right now that we would need to solve as a society. Do you have any examples that you've seen with other leaders that you talk to who are in L&D, maybe leading other L&D organizations, where you say, wow, that's a great way in which they are experimenting with AI, or I like how they're responding to the shifts, and you're kind of following their journey to see how things play out?
The one person, or two, Dr. Philippa Hardman, she's a former CLO. She's associated with Cambridge, and she's doing a lot of research right now. And her hypothesis is AI can make L&D 75% faster, 75% more effective, and 75% more cost effective, cheaper. So I think that her research and journey is really interesting. So she's somebody I paid close attention to. The other is Dr. Kim Lone Tran, who's the CLO for Allstate. They are very heavy in using AI across their business in general, but then also from an L&D perspective. And then I would also say, BDO. One of the things that I really respect about BDO, and again, I'm not here to sell, is our CEO has taken an AI first mentality, and not a lot of other professional services firms have done that. And he wants everybody to be thinking about it, to be playing with it in the realms of where we can, obviously not with customer data and anything that's going to put us in legal risk, but recognizes that there is no version of the future that exists without AI. And that Pandora's box has been opened. It's like the internet. There's no going back now. So we should all be thinking about how to leverage this. For me, some of the use cases I've been using it for, I was creating a program last week and I needed to create some engaging scenarios. And like I said earlier, everything I do goes through it. Now, I can't say that that's the mindset yet for my entire team. They're still getting comfortable with this idea, but what I'm doing as a leader is every time they send me something, I'm responding and saying, did you test this out in AI? Did you review it in AI first? Like, go there first, get it to be even better, then bring me in. Because otherwise they're sending it to me and first thing I'm doing is putting in AI and seeing, hey, how can we make this even better? What I love, the use case for me is continuous improvement. I think we can always be better. And what a great tool to have with you, that I'm a better writer now, I'm a better speaker, I'm a better leader. We should all be using it.
I love that. Yeah. I have a question actually, as you start to encourage your team to use it. What I'm hearing through the grapevine, I don't have concrete data or anything, but this is what I'm hearing from a lot of organizations that I speak to or work with. Seems like there are some power users inside organizations of these AI tools, but the general adoption is quite low because it does require a bit of a behavior change in how you approach or conceptualize it, break down the tasks, right? Because you're kind of adding this tool, which is not necessarily natural to how you've done work before. So how are you seeing adoption, and how are you thinking about driving adoption? Do you see any do you have thoughts on how you might drive that up? Or is that something you're experimenting with actively to see what would work?
So one thing that you'll learn, I'm very transparent. So I've talked a lot about the great things that BDO is doing. So now I'll share our adoption rate is poor. It's poor. We were one of the first organizations to have access to Microsoft Copilot. And we started rolling it out about 3 months ago. The problem is Copilot is, I would say, I don't know, I'm just going to make a number, like 50% behind ChatGPT. And Microsoft has a good roadmap for what's coming up, and it's early days. And so as an early access partner, we get access to that early version, and it's not going to be perfect. And so I think as a result of that, we're struggling a bit with the adoption because people are expecting it to be a ChatGPT. But ChatGPT isn't necessarily safe. That's one of the challenges with it. But Copilot is safe, and it's in a lockdown environment, which means its functionality and its access to broader data sets is going to be much more limited. So as a result of that, I think we're struggling from a Copilot adoption usage. The other piece is we haven't done a good job yet with the why. So Copilot is great for recording your meetings and transcribing and coming up with summaries and things like that. So that's a great use case. Beyond that, there's a lot of struggles with what could you use it for. So in summary, Copilot, we're struggling with adoption. ChatGPT, I would say, has a little bit of a better adoption, but because we don't have an enterprise model yet, it's more about encouraging people to go out and use it on their own devices. And so I just had a meeting last week, and I was trying to help our business partners see, because they kept saying, this is a training problem. It's a training problem. I said, this is not a training problem. This is a change management initiative. This is a behavior change. I can give you the 3 great use cases for Copilot and for ChatGPT, and we can train you on that. But if we don't get you to understand the larger value proposition and the way that you need to alter your behavior, it's not going to be part of our adoption process. So one example is in the Skill Up Summit, we've got about 5 sessions around AI. In one of those sessions, 2 of them rather, it's all about the way BDO is using it, because we're using it successfully with our clients. We've got a lot of great wins. So the first thing I want to do is I want to help our internal employees understand, here's how we're using it today with clients so that they can feel pride. The second thing is I'm creating a program that's around Trusted Advisor. And part of that program is around business development opportunities. And the tool that we're asking people to do is, before you go to a client, use AI to learn about that client and uncover, what are some of the challenges the client may have. And so we're trying to find little ways to embed it into their behaviors. So it's less about this big thing and like, oh, be fearful of AI, it's going to take your job and it's going to revolutionize everything. But it's more about, what are the 3 little ways that we can get you to start using it in your day-to-day life?
Yeah, and I think that makes it really concrete and tactical, that people can try. And by the way, from what you're describing, one of the things that I've heard a lot of L&D professionals say is, how do we show the impact of our work, like the ROI of L&D and so on, right? For the foreseeable future, where a lot of enterprises are having adoption challenges, I could imagine actually adoption of AI tools in day-to-day work being a pretty measurable metric, and L&D being at the forefront of driving that by exposing people to these specific use cases and driving behavior change.
Yeah. So one of the things that we're doing on that point that I recommend for listeners is, what's the AI quotient for your firm? So we are measuring right now the AI quotient of our firm today, and then we're going to measure it in 12 months to demonstrate exactly what you're talking about. Not necessarily from an L&D aspect, although that's part of it, but more of from an organization aspect, how are we changing the organization? And the other thing that we're doing is in the programs that we launch, we're doing, of course, a pre and a post assessment. So where were their knowledge level before they came in and then their knowledge level after? And so we'll aggregate that with the AI quotient data as well. And so that's an opportunity for L&D, across the board is, hey, if your company doesn't have an AI quotient, start one for them. And it's also a good professional services opportunity because there's not really a survey tool that exists yet. I was scouring for about a month to try and find one. So finally I was like, all right, well, let's just use AI and come up with our own AI quotient survey tool.
Yeah, it's like, and you could AIQ, which makes a ton of sense. What are some criteria that's within that? I'm curious.
What's your willingness and interest level to want to learn or want to use it? Fear, are you fearful of this? Do you know how it's going to impact your organization? Are you thinking about how it's going to impact your organization? And then there's a bit of the knowledge assessment. Do you know what a large language model is? Do you know the difference between ChatGPT and Copilot? Do you know neural networks? Do you know what tokens are? And hitting on a lot of the key themes that we want people to understand, because going back to what our executive leadership team did, we don't just want people to know ChatGPT and Copilot and AI. We want people to actually understand. So we're using the 5 levels, Maslow's hierarchy, to reframe or to frame our approach to the AI quotient. So do you understand it? Can you apply it? Et cetera, et cetera.
Got it. So it's almost like the levels. Like, first of all, you need to get it. Second, you have to, it gets more and more complex understanding of it and application of it, it seems like.
Yeah. And also understanding not everybody's going to be a level 5. To your point earlier about the champions piece, we were doing the math and maybe 0.8% of our company is going to be a level 5. We don't want everybody to be a level 5 who can go out there and sell and teach and build. But we do want the firm at large to be a level 3. We want you to understand it. We want you to know it. We want you to be able to apply it and think about and be changing the strategy so that you're using it.
Yeah, and love this tiered view of maturity and sort of where people are, because then it allows you to really have a quantitative discussion about it as a team and understand where are we, what more do we have to do, and so on. Very cool. And this kind of work, who are the kinds of stakeholders in the business that you have to really corral to bring to life? Because it's a pretty central framework, it feels like, for an organization and its view on its own capability.
Luckily for us, we don't have to do that at all. In fact, I would say, so we have our 4 main service lines, and then we have supporting lines. And one of the supporting lines is innovation and change. And so the INC team, they are driving this probably harder than I am, which is great. It's great to have that support and to not be tried over here, ringing all the bells like, hey, we need to think about this. We've got a whole team of experts that are focusing on it.
That's great. Keith, I want to ask, maybe away from AI now, back a little bit to learning. It's one of these questions I want to ask all of the guests. Do you have a deeply held belief that's either kind of unintuitive or non-consensus about how people learn or the field of L&D? And if you do, I'm curious what it is and where that belief came from.
I can give you one of each if you'd like.
Yeah, that'd be awesome.
So I'll start first with the belief about the field of L&D. We are a low entry barrier field. Anyone can take a course on Coursera, LinkedIn Learning, wherever, and then say, I'm an instructional designer. I'm a learning strategist, what I'm seeing now is a lot of people saying, I'm a fractional CLO. This is a double-edged sword. On one hand, I wouldn't have been able to join the industry if it weren't that low barrier. I had zero experience when I joined. I only got my first job as a trainer because I had valid car insurance and no criminal record. That's it. That was how I entered as a trainer. That's also where I had to learn how to learn, because I had to learn how to do my job and teach others. The flip side is we have people who are joining who aren't qualified or credible, like me, but then trying to pass themselves off as being credible. And then they get in front of stakeholders and they can't perform. And then that perpetuates this cycle that we are order takers, we don't drive value, and then we're busy continuing trying to chase our tail of, well, how can we evolve? How can we evolve being past order takers? And so my message when I talk to L&D practitioners is, did you earn your credibility? Or are you just going to your stakeholder demanding that they respect you because what? Because you gave yourself a job title? Why should they respect you? You have to be able to answer that to yourself, and you have to be able to demonstrate it to them. So you have to put the work in. And, for the first 10 years, I was a complete order taker. I didn't even know there was a science to the way that we do things in learning. I didn't know any of that. And then I started to build up some credibility, and I built up the foundation and the framework. It took me quite a long time. So I'm not saying that I did anything perfect at all. I'm part of the problem as well. And I think that's why I'm so passionate. I feel like this is my penance. My penance to try and bring others along quickly, because I had that opportunity. And I don't want to stop people from having the opportunity. But if you're going to, sneak your way in, you've got to earn that credibility. And even if it's not your own experience, you can still gather data. You can gather research. Again, World Economic Forum, McKinsey Global Institute, Chief Learning Officer, all of these places, Google Scholar, not Google, get the data to demonstrate and to back up why you're recommending a specific suggestion that you're recommending, and to show your credibility that, hey, I may not have the experience, but I have a network. I have the ability to learn how to solve your problems because I'm able to use all these different data sets. So my belief about the L&D industry, it's a low entry barrier. And as a result of that, I think that does us a disservice. And if you're going to go under that low entry, then please build up your credibility. And this is a great book.
Yeah, I read it and I definitely recommend it to folks. By the way, our VP of Learning Design who joined us recently, that was the book I said, hey, I think you should read this book. So,
oh, excellent. I will give you a second book that they should read. I have no association with this one. Make It Stick: The Science of Successful Learning. This is the most important book that any L&D practitioner, talent practitioner would read. And I think this is going to be incredibly useful for you and for Sparkwise. And again, this is number one. This one is number two, but this one's number one. And the reason is, and it took me 10 plus years to figure this out, that there are learning sciences, that there are ways that the brain works, that there are principles and philosophies and practices we should be applying in the way that we design, develop, and execute learning initiatives. And this book encompasses it beautifully. It's research-based. It was done by 2 doctors and a great storyteller. So most important book. The second part of your question, I would say the non-obvious belief that I have, I think, is about the importance of failure. For me, the word fail stands for first attempt in learning. First attempt in learning. So failure is a positive data point. It's a positive data point that gets you one step closer to finding that right solution. And I grew up, and I mentioned this at the beginning of this, fearing failure, because that was the only thing that my father, he was in the military, a colonel in the military, focused on. The only thing that school focused on It was less about celebrating the wins. It was more about, well, you failed, and not creating a safe environment for you to fail. And failure promotes resilience and adaptability. It encourages innovation. It helps problem solving. It fosters a growth mindset, and it creates authentic learning experiences. You have to have, especially in organizations and schools, but right now I'm focused on organizations, you have to create that safe space where people can fail. And I think of it as like you want to fail fast, quickly, get up and get back and figure out the right solution. And that's one of the reasons why I love design thinking as a tool and a framework when you're trying to problem find or problem solve solutions, because by design, the framework is set up for you to fail quickly. And then you go back and you prototype again and you test, you pilot. Nope, you fail. Okay, you go back. And it's like this rinse, repeat, part of the agile cycle to get you closer to that solution. So long story short, I think we need more failure opportunities and more celebrations of failures.
That was a great note to wrap this up, Keith. I am definitely stealing first attempt in learning going forward. I love that framing.
My gift.
Thank you. Keith, thanks so much for taking the time to join today and share so many different types of insights from different parts of your life. I've learned a lot talking to you. And of course, I look forward to us continuing to build our relationship, beyond the podcast too.
Absolutely. Again, it's my pleasure to be on the inaugural episode. And Vince did not ask me to say this, but I'm going to say it. Check out Sparkwise. It is a great platform to help support your key learning initiatives.